Hey guys, I am here with Russell Ross. He received his BA from Texas A&M. I know that's not Kaiser, but it's perfectly okay. And it is one of the most renowned schools in the United States. One of the schools I wanted to go to, but shh, don't tell nobody. And he earned his master's at Anglo State University, and he was a program manager for L3 for over 5 years. And now, where are you working?
So at Raytheon Technologies Corporation, which is the new name that started last Friday. So it's kind of crazy. We'll get into it during the questions.
All right. So we're super excited to have him on board, and thank you, Russ, for doing this. It means a lot to us. Um, in the project management field, like we're learning about it, and basically the goal for this interview is really to find get true insight from somebody in the field that's actually doing it versus just reading and looking over textbooks, because a lot of times we say we might not need this, but in actuality, we really might. And we've talked a little bit recently, and one thing that strikes me as completely like off the wall is some of the things that we're actually learning is some of the things that we're actually going to experience out there in the field. So that being said, Russ, again, thank you for participating. Greatly appreciate it. So with that, I want to go to the first question. And what was your perception coming into project management, and how does it differ from actually being in the field?
So perception versus reality, huh? It was kind of weird. I didn't really have, per se, any preconceived notions of what I might experience because, you know, starting whenever I first got hired on at L3, I was in finance and I kind of rose through the ranks into project management and ended up kind of coming up there. My wife ended up, I kind of accepted a position at Raytheon. We ended up making a move. So I didn't really have a preconceived notion per se on what I might experience, but I will say that going into it, what I know now is that it's better to have a plan and have steps in place. Know a little bit about everything that's going on. You don't have to know down to the detail, but just know enough to be functional and useful in a meeting. But really, I mean, it's kind of day to day is just different. Every single day is different. So
Awesome. So what does your typical day look like doing this? I mean, we look at it in the textbook sense, and we're just thinking like, wow, like 90 to like 99% of it is really about planning each and every little detail about a project, and then like going out and getting it done. So what does your typical day start off like?
So my typical day usually starts out with plenty of coffee, and no, I emails come in right now. Here's what's crazy: how quickly the dynamics of things change, and how quickly you have to adapt to your environment these days. Um, so I went out on paternity leave, and during that time, got called into or got a text message that said we would no longer be coming to the facility anymore, and had to drop everything. And now I'm set up, and you're sitting in my office, and I have to make decisions and do things that completely it's changed. So here, I still try to do all my calls in the form of my meetings, um, and it's kind of wild. You adapt to it. You constant communication and keeping those lines of communication is key, because when stakeholders are in the mix, they want to know what you're doing. If there's an issue, how are you mitigating that risk? What all are you putting into place to help solve the problem? So, but meetings all day long, conference calls all day long, uh, customer meetings, running reports, pulling data. Um, it's kind of ridiculous. What all? I mean, pretty long hours right now. Here's what's wild. Like now, it's 24/7 because people are sending stuff at 2, 3 a.m. and it's kind of wild time. So.
Wow, that's insane. That's kind of like what's going on with us, and like our professors are trying to figure out, hey, is this easier on you guys? So maybe we should give you guys extra homework and extra projects just to make sure. But I can understand where you're coming from. Do you think what's been your biggest challenge with this COVID-19 and trying to meet up with people and letting stakeholders know what's going on?
So I spoke with you a little bit about this whenever we talked about this, but ultimately, one of the things that I've noticed in myself is having to really trust the people that are there on site. That if I need something done and I tell them, hey, we gotta get this out, we gotta do this task, trusting that they're going to get it done, because it's a hard thing, because I like to follow up. I'm a hands-on guy. I'm not really used to this hands-off kind of, hey, pointing fingers kind of management. That more often than not is what I'm doing, and giving status. But right now, I mean, I would have to say that building that trust with your coworkers, which it's there, but it's a different level now. It's I mean, it's crazy, because here's the thing: they're being asked to do crazy stuff too, because their families are at risk and everything. So the stuff that we're asking them to do for our defense industry is kind of, it's pretty awesome what they do. So.
And so you're front lines in the at Raytheon. You're in the operations management portion of it, so you get to see everything go down like in person, right? Can you explain a little bit more about like what you do in Raytheon and how that ties into project management?
Okay, so what I do at Raytheon is I'm the operations program manager. So if you take like the grand scheme of things, I actually manage a component line for mainly U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy assets, some Army assets as well. These are usually turret type items that are used by those branches of government. And so they come in with any kind of problem out in the field, and we will bring them in, analyze the issues, kind of report to the customer a estimate at completion of how much a bid of what it'll cost. And and so I have to kind of track that and constantly keep budget aware with these items. When they have a problem, when you bring them in, sometimes the problem that you think you saw based on the customer complaint ends up being a whole nother thing whenever you bring it in. So it's different from day to day. It's always exciting. You always have to look at ways to mitigate your risk. Usually, I mean, it's like you look at, for example, a risk mitigation technique. If you're in the automobile industry, if you're in the defense industry, and you're doing repairs, one of the things that you want to look at is your repair history and say, hey, what's our commonly failed items? Like, let's get these items on a shelf. We're willing to hedge our bet here because we know that 1 out of 5 of these units is going to have this problem. So we use that data to kind of make a determination on how we're going to address the problems we might experience. So it's little things like that you
and I can imagine like working, having a stakeholder like the United States Navy or like the Army. That's not, these are government officials, these are like important people that help protect our nation. And so I'm sure that's got to be insane. I'm like super excited for this interview, to be just talking to somebody that's just cool, So how does that make you feel being front lines in something, in a project or a group of projects that your stakeholders are like our defense system or like aerospace, NASA? Like, how does that make you feel? And like, you've worked for so like L3 and Raytheon, two of the biggest names in aerospace and defense. How does that make you feel?
I've never really thought about just like how it makes me feel. I've been blessed to be in the situations of where I'm at now. That also comes with preparation, and what y'all are doing is part of that preparation. You got to go through all the muck, I'm sorry, to get things like these, and then you move on, and you realize that, looking back, they put it in textbook form. You see it in real life, and you're like, you're starting to do it, and you're like, something about this seems familiar. And then you're like, oh man, this is what they were telling me all those years ago that I was just trying to get by and do. So what I'm saying is, be as much of a sponge as you can, and always thirsting for knowledge. Never stop growing. Just when you think complacency is building, it's time to mix it up. Maybe leave. Mm-hmm. I felt at L3, I loved my job. I was building some of the greatest aircraft that I thought, and I haven't even really got into that one because that one will get me going. But building some of the greatest aircraft that I believe on the planet, that do some of the most good for the United States people, and for our government and defense forces. So it does make me very proud. One of the things that really got me going is when my customer, they always used to bust my chops during meetings, because that's what military guys do. Like, there's no taking it easy. So I was up there talking, and my voice was just, it was my first big speech in front of all this high brass people, which means they had a lot of stuff on them. And my customer, which was a chief master sergeant in the Air Force, I go back to his office, and he apparently had told his airmen to tell them whenever I was coming, and I was walking by, and he goes, "Hey." And I was like, so you just better be ready. If you can't laugh at yourself and kind of brush some stuff off, you're not going to make it in project management. But it's just kind of funny. You learn so much, but what I learned is they're just people too, doing a job. Their job just so happens to serve our better good, which is self-sacrifice, which is crazy. I mean, so you're around a bunch of men and women that are like that. It makes it easy to do your job and to do it well. Failure is not an option. Refuse. You see them, I refuse. So that's what keeps me going. That's what makes me happy. That's what I've stayed in this industry for. It's special. Can be intimidating at times, but my dad always told me, he's like, you know what? They put their pants on just like you do in the morning. And I'm like, that always sticks in my head. I'm just like, okay.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, like, I mean, whenever you're dealing with people like that, what do you, like, are there any certain techniques that you might have when you know that, like, a project is going to be, is going to pass your deadline? Or, like, what do you do to try to stay on task and make sure that you do meet your deadlines?
So, one of the best ways, so I guess you kind of asked really two questions, like how do you deliver bad information? And I'll answer that question, and then I want you to repeat the second part, because that one kind of stuck with me. I was just like, oh my gosh, because this is one of the best things that I had to learn as a program manager early on. If you go to somebody with a problem, you go with them and you say, oh, we're going to be over budget. Dang. One, how are you mitigating? Did you notice this? Were there issues? All that. You need to have all that information. And if there's a way to mitigate it, or there's a solution, you need to offer up a solution immediately after you tell them about the issue. Let them vent though, because sometimes it's no fault of your own. They're not yelling at you, mad at the situation. You gotta let it go. Don't wear your heart on your sleeve, because quite frankly, you will get your feelings hurt more often than not. Boss comes and tells you, hey, deadline is this. You're thinking, oh my gosh, that's unfeasible. He doesn't know what he's asking. Sorry, but dig in. So it's kind of funny because you're in my office, but I've got this little corkboard, and it's kind of funny, and it says, work hard and get stuff done. It says get it done, not try. Mm-hmm. So it's takes some time, right? But you get there. Trial by fire, but always come with a solution to a problem too, or an idea. I mean, even the wackiest of ideas, sometimes you're like, maybe. So, I mean, it's kind of like, it's weird because you put the pen to paper and then you're like, okay, so maybe that would work if we limited flight hours to this much and then blah blah blah. So I mean, it's just there's a lot of analysis and data crunching and everything that goes into making an informed decision. So
Wow, that's crazy. So are there any techniques that you use like with software to try to come up with like, hey man, can I make this easier some way somehow? Like I gotta know this because we're all asking this question, like this software stuff or like what's going on.
so um yes, software. Okay, I am not a coding person. I am dangerous enough to kind of maybe understand some of the syntax that they're putting in, but I am not that guy. So I have to trust, like I was talking about, those guys to make those decisions and to give me the right kind of information. Um, so using the Scrum analysis that you talked about, we also, so in our software development, we live and die by our Gantt charts. So you have to lay out your timeline, and if there's slippages, like we have to, because everything you try to, your Gantt chart, you want, if something's running a little long, we have to see where can we kind of cross efforts and maybe run stuff in parallel and find a way to make up for that lost time or something like that. You do that with Gantt charts, you do that through all of your Scrum activities. We also, Raytheon does their own Six Sigma program. So we actually have, we use the same structure, belt structure as Six Sigma, but it's called Raytheon Six Sigma. So I am what we consider a Raytheon specialist in my Six Sigma training, which means I can run a Six Sigma project group. Like I can be the head over it, the leader. So it's a little bit different because we structured it very much so for our company, very defense oriented. We wanted everybody to kind of have a unified approach per se. So that's why they kind of tailored and critiqued the Six Sigma program itself to make a Raytheon Six Sigma. So there is a lot of stuff. So the company probably, if I was to equate it to time, probably an eighth to a fourth of my time a year is devoted to kind of training or continuous development for the company. That is a substantial investment. If you look at that, for just one employee, but Raytheon is now the second largest, or Raytheon Technologies Corporation is now the second largest defense contractor in the world. So it's kind of crazy right now because we just became this huge company and everybody's like, okay, things are going to be different, but right now we're still kind of slowly transitioning everything. So, but everything's been very smooth and working well. So
what do you think are the major advantages and the disadvantages of using something like the Gantt chart?
An advantage is constantly knowing what position you should be in. It's up to you to actually know where you're at. But to know on Gantt charts, if you wanted to, you can put down the time of day that you want it done. And it's kind of ridiculous, but that's how detailed our Gantt charts are, especially when it comes to our software development. If our software stuff can't really go into too terribly many details about it, but if the customer sees an issue out in the field, it gets replicated, it gets addressed, it's done immediately. Like, there's no time to miss your deadline. Like, if it's people running 24/7 to try to figure out what happened, that's what it takes. So it's kind of a different business model, or different industry, not business model, because defense, like, there's times when wartime, like, I had a bunch of mentors at L3 that used to tell me about the Gulf War and how busy they were, how planes would just fly constantly and how much they would do. And it was like, and you saw a little bit of that because we have our wars that we've been in since 2001. So it's kind of crazy. So it's now 2020. It's a long time at war, but anyways.
So you talk about these people that have been there for like so many years, that have been such a huge help to you, and like, how is that learning? A part of project management is that you learn and you grow, and it's a constant learning and growing. How do you think that that this is you've been in project management for how long already?
Oh man, about 7, 8 years, I guess.
So
I mean, 8, actually. Yeah, that's my 8th year.
So how do you think that learning and developing has played a role with you specifically, and how in the future you see that growing into the next generation coming into project management?
So what I will tell y'all is, this is the first step, right? So your next step is getting that first my dad called it my big boy job, because it was my first, like, salaried employee job, and he's like, you got your big boy job, so he's like, now you can take care of your bills. And I'm like, thank you, that was awesome. But so it's just ever evolving, learning that every day you could, in today's environment right now, what you just learned is things change like that. You're meeting in class, and then all of a sudden, boom, everybody's sitting at their home watching in front of a computer, and this is the new norm. This might be the new norm for a lot longer than what we would like. We're going to get through it, but it is what it is. So always be ready for ever-changing things and ever-evolving. Be adaptable. So I was in program management, and I told myself, I'm like, if I want to make the next big step in my career, I've got to go back and get my master's. At the time, I was like, it was not the time to be doing it. Very busy. I went and talked to my manager, and he was like, you know what? If you're ready to do it, just send me the paperwork. If you get into a school, I'll pay for it. And I was like, get into a school? Okay, yeah. It was like, okay. So I went and applied to a few schools and got into the one I wanted to. So sent him the paperwork, got the thing done in about 18 months. It was hard. It was ridiculous. I had a baby, or I myself did not have a baby. My wife had a baby uh, during all that, and but we kind of, I don't know, it was a struggle, but it wasn't too much to handle. Um, as long as you keep going, as long as you are keep plugging away at something, what you need to understand is that having a piece of paper on the wall is nothing but telling an employer or somebody that you meet that if you ask me to do something, that I can do it. I've got something that tells you that somebody entrusted me with a lot of stuff, and I completed well over 80% or whatever, of those tasks to get that paper. So this tells me that that person is reliable. So you work hard, you get stuff done, and that's what you do. But you always keep trying, because see, one thing that I am now going to try to do is I'm going to get my PMP certification, Program Management Professional. So it's PMP. So that's my next thing. So I'm also already in a Raytheon Program Management Certification program. So it's a different certification level. Pretty much, if you want to get promoted, you have to be certified with all your trainings and such to get to that level. It's just a certification saying, hey, yeah, he's trained and certified to our standards, so we're good. And so always be ready for change.
Wow.
Never be comfortable. When you find yourself being complacent, take the next step. Because, quite frankly, greatness doesn't come from complacency. Greatness comes from people taking big chances when times are tough. And right now, this is going to be weird, but what you tell an employer, what he's like, you had an online school and blah, 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 and you use a disadvantage as an advantage, and you say, no, I learned in a changing work environment how to perform, and I've got that. I can do it. So I can work remotely, or I can work right next to you. So I'm ready.
You think that's a characteristic of most people in project management, to be adaptable to change and to know how to handle that between suppliers and the supply chain, to being able to talk to workers that do the job, along with all that negotiation and the politics that it comes with. Do you think that's part of the characteristics?
So the book will tell you, the textbook, that most leaders are going to be type A personalities, are going to be this, are going to be that. But that's not my philosophy at all. I don't know, because I've always been a little bit of a renegade, but my philosophy is leadership can be a lot of different things at a lot of different times. Certain personality traits can come out in certain people that could make them excel in like this time right now, or somebody could fall right now. A good leader knows how to recognize, is always aware of their people, always keeps constant communication, builds people up, doesn't tear them down, knows how to. I took a communication class, um, and it was talked about eye communication. Like, hey, I've got an issue with something that I really need your help with. That's a lot better than saying, hey, I need you to go do something. You need to go do this. So I've got an issue with something. I need your help. Like when you come to somebody and you talk to them like that, like you get on their level and you say, I need something from you, where that puts you as their equal on the same playing field. I don't ever believe that you should talk down to subordinates. It is imperative to have good working relationships and good communication with everyone. But you know, leadership is something that it can't really be defined. You know, it's something that people feel. It's something that they see. So it's something that you know, some people may have it and some people may not. You can be a heck of a leader and not be a manager, and you can be a manager and not be a leader, which is weird. So I know, like, some people just like to be kind of in the shadows and do their thing, and you know, this is what's funny is my wife's like that. My wife doesn't like to be the person out in front, or to say, she's the one that says, hey, can you go talk to so-and-so? I got this right here going. And so it's knowing your people, it's knowing your circumstances, it's understanding situations and having situational awareness. Just to be yourself and be vulnerable, because, and it's okay to ask questions too, because you're going to get an organization and every organization handles stuff differently. You know that as well as I do, because you've been a part of a few organizations now and you've seen glaring differences, just like L3 to Raytheon. So you just take it all and for what it's worth, you know.
So what do you, like, have you ever experienced in your own personal life a difficult situation that like it was a difficult situation personally, and then you had to deal with it during work? And I know that being in project management, that's a lot of work. And how do you deal with something like that? The coronavirus, that's like a very blue moon, but you know, like I myself, you know, my father just passed away last month from pancreatic cancer while I'm in school in the middle of midterms, and I'm like, how do I deal with this? What is your? Have you ever had a situation like that, and a personal issue, and how you dealt with it during the middle of a project or something?
Yeah. So first off, very sorry to hear about your father. I noticed something on Facebook, and I have kind of forgot to mention something too. So I'm very sorry to hear that. I've never experienced anything like that, because that's a toughie. Now I did. One of the closest people to me that's ever passed away was my grandmother, and it was sudden, and I was in school, and I was a pretty new program manager. I had a baby on the way, and it's just like all this whirlwind of stuff, and then all of a sudden she dies the day before her 90th birthday, and so it was tough. And grief is a tough thing to deal with whenever you're in some kind of management or project management type role. Um, I think having people to lean on in those times, because what I did is I delegated some of my stuff to people, so I had to trust in my team, because there's always, like, I had a contingent, like L3 and Raytheon make you have like a step down contingency plan if something was to happen to you or you were to go out on short term, who could pick up your slack. And so that kind of goes into effect. So that's a little bit of a mitigation plan, right? But it's tough when you're dealing with something like that, because quite frankly, until you dealt with the grief, um, your mind isn't ready for the work yet. Because my idea is, you know, it took me a while to get back to like getting myself emotionally ready, and kind of physically, because it's draining. Takes a toll on you spiritually and emotionally and physically, and it was very tough. I leaned on my family and friends, and my colleagues. That being said, you have to learn to not take it all on yourself. Now, sometimes, if you're the only one, in the case that you don't have some mitigation plan, do the best you can when you can. I mean, it's a tough situation. Sometimes, if you can get an extra set of eyes on something, maybe that helps. Maybe, because sometimes in those moments of grief, we really struggle to think clearly. So just do things like that, like taking small breaks. Do the big task in smaller chunks. There's some parable I heard that was like, how do you eat an elephant? And it was one bite at a time. Not PETA friendly, but
it's just a phrase.
Yes. But how do you eat a really big yellow lettuce one bite at a time? It's totally organic lettuce, no fertilizers.
It's all vegan, minus the leather handbag.
Yes.
So what?
I like my Cayman handbag. It's horrible. It's like you're killing dinosaurs for your purse.
So what do you think has been your most successful project, and how do you measure success? That's probably the hardest question that I've like come across, is like, how do you measure success? But what's your most successful project?
Okay, so most successful project monetarily to date was a project that I had with L3. Ran field service teams, so we had locations all over the place. And when I say all over the place, that means all over the world, which I'm not getting into. And something went wrong, we'd go fix it. We had a 24-hour window that we were going to be there, no matter where you were. I had to coordinate that. So I didn't really get into all that because I can't really talk terribly much. So that's about all I can say about that. Very successful, highly like accolades and such on that. Was I happy? Yes, I was extremely happy. But like I said, in this industry, what will kill you is complacency. It's always on to the next thing. But what I will tell you is, I've learned in my 3-year-old is peeking at me through the door. So what I've learned is that success to me was not once what I thought when I was in my chair as a student, because I very quickly could tell you that success was for me to have a degree, for me to have a 6-figure salary, for me to have an MBA and do all these things and have a nice house. And you get all these things, and then you go, what next? But all these things are nice. But how do you judge success? I don't judge it like that anymore. I felt like that was a naive thing for me to do, because that's not how I judge success. I judge success of building people up around me. How many people that I come in contact with can I make happy or help or influence or something throughout the day? Being the best dad to my children, husband to my wife, which just sounds really weird and it almost made me emotional talking about that, but perspectives change. And what I will say is, in your life, whatever makes you happy, I will say, always keep your family close and your friends that build you up close to you. Don't waste time on the stuff that tears you down. Life's too short for that. But success is up to each individual person. But that's also life's question, because ultimately you are responsible for the person you become. So what in your life do you want when it comes to the end of your days and you look back and you say, what have I done? Am I going to be happy with the person that I was? And am I going to have any regrets? And don't live with regrets.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. How do you feel that the company that you were working for, how did they feel like it was, the whole thing was successful? And if they're usually like one person would think like, hey, if there's a problem or something comes up, then it's not a huge success. But I mean, how do you come up with how does a company notice that, hey, there was something that needed to be done within 24 hours, and if not, something major is going to happen? How do you measure success as far as like the stakeholders, the people that the products were delivered to, the company that you work for, yourself, and like the product itself? Like, how do they measure it? Like, what is success?
So it is kind of in my industry, it's very cut and dried. You might have to explain people what that means later. I'm sorry, that's a Northeast Texas slang, and not all Texans sound like myself. So very, very sorry.
They're all Gen Z, so they'll tell you. There's a dictionary out there for them specifically.